You ever wonder why we never see any stars? Karsten muttered, squinting up at the blank, simulated sky. It was as blue and empty as a politician's promises. The orbital tower had its own fake little slice of paradise. Rolling fake hills, chirping fake birds, and a sun that shone like it was hungover. Althea snorted, her fingers digging into the artificial soil of her garden with practiced ease. I'm more concerned about why the tomatoes taste like despair. But sure, let's tackle the mystery of the galaxies next. She flicked a worm, real, or at least convincing enough to wriggle like one, onto the path. Despair or not, they're the best we've got, Karsten said, dropping down beside her with a thud. Or do you think we're finally due for a surprise delivery of chocolate cake from our benevolent overlords? Only if they want to test out if we've got a sense of humor, she replied. Last I checked, that was a dangerous trait. Karsten chuckled, though it was more like a cough that got lost on its way out. What's the going rate for human laughter these days? 1 less hour of simulation? An extra scoop of hope-flavored gruel? Hope-flavored gruel is a luxury, my friend. We're stuck with the regular brand. But hey, at least we're not dead. Althea rose, dusting off her hands. Real or fake, dirt was still dirt. They'd been in the tower for as long as they could remember. The alien simulators, the custodians, as they were ironically termed, had a flair for bland efficiency. The world was a pristine prison, where freedom was a memory so blurred it might as well have been fiction. Do you ever think about what's outside? Karsten asked, not for the first time. The question hung between them, heavier than the synthetic air. Only when I'm bored of thinking about how to make fungus taste like steak, Althea replied. Another futile endeavor, but hey, it passes the time. Karsten sighed, leaning back against a tree that probably had a serial number instead of a name. All the wonders of the universe and we get stuck in the cosmic equivalent of a fishbowl. Aren't we just the luckiest species? Lucky, cursed, same difference, Althea said, her voice dropping to a whisper. But something's gotta give, right? They can't keep us here forever. Why not? He shot back, playing devil's advocate as usual. They've got us nicely contained, docile as lambs. We're the safest science experiment in the galaxy. Althea shook her head, determination blazing in her eyes. I'm not a lab rat, Karsten. I'm a botanist with a penchant for breaking rules. And I've got a feeling our captors aren't as infallible as they think. Feeling or wishful thinking? Karsten's skepticism was a well-worn cloak. Difference is? Althea quipped, a smirk tugging at her lips. We either die trying or die waiting. I prefer action. Speaking of action, Karsten said, I've been tinkering with one of the maintenance droids. They're not as complex as I expected. I might be able to hijack its systems. Althea's eyes widened. And do what? Order a pizza? Access restricted areas, he replied, lowering his voice further. Find out what's really out there. Maybe even get a message out. And if they catch us, we'll be the first to know what alien hell looks like. Althea grinned. Always wanted a front row seat to damnation. They shared a conspiratorial glance, the kind that carried the weight of shared secrets and unspoken plans. Trust was a rare currency in their world. The faint hum of the custodian's surveillance drones echoed overhead, a gentle reminder that Big Brother was always watching. Karsten flicked a glance at one, raising a defiant middle finger. Nice, Althea said, that'll show him. Gotta start somewhere, he replied. Small acts of rebellion and all that. They fell into silence, each lost in thoughts of escape plans and the myriad ways they could go horribly wrong. But the alternative, staying, was a nest of thorns they'd long grown tired of sitting on. Did you ever think you'd miss bad TV? Althea mused aloud, breaking the quiet. Karsten chuckled. Not just bad TV, bad everything. At least it was real. Real enough to distract us from reality, she agreed. But who knows, maybe the universe has a sense of irony after all. Here's hoping, Karsten said, and for a moment, hope didn't taste quite so bitter. Their conversation was cut short by the arrival of another resident, a perpetually nervous man named Harlan, who looked like he'd misplaced a winning lottery ticket. What's up, Harlan? Althea called, watching him fidget his way over. Nothing good, he replied, glancing over his shoulder as if the word, trouble, was painted there. The custodians have been acting weird. Seen some new equipment being brought in. Great, maybe they're upgrading the zoo, Karsten deadpanned. State-of-the-art cages for all. Harlan's expression didn't change, and that made the air a bit heavier. Seriously, though, he insisted. Something's up. I overheard some of them talking. Althea raised an eyebrow. You playing spy now? Accidentally, Harlan admitted. I was trying to find a quiet spot to read and overheard them. Did they say anything interesting? Karsten asked. Just enough to make me paranoid, Harlan replied. They mentioned something about reset protocols. Althea and Karsten exchanged a look. Reset wasn't a word anyone liked to hear. It smacked of finality in a way that turned the stomach. Sounds like they're planning a little more than a firmware update, Althea said, trying to make light of it, but her voice held an edge. Yeah, well, I'd rather not find out firsthand, Harlan said, running a hand through his hair as if trying to smooth out the wrinkles in his mind. Don't worry, Karsten said, his own anxiety thinly veiled. We'll just have to outrun the system. That's the spirit, Althea added, though her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. They watched Harlan shuffle away, weighed down by more than just gravity. Althea sighed, a sound that echoed the one in Karsten's chest. Well, she said, time to step up our timeline, I suppose. Guess so, he replied, already calculating their next move. No time like the present to test fate's patience. She nodded, already moving toward the maintenance hatch at the edge of the garden. Let's just hope they're as bored of us as we are of them. Yeah, Karsten said, following her lead. And if not, at least we'll give them a show to remember. The hatch creaked open, revealing the dimly lit guts of their artificial world. It wasn't welcoming, but it was a start. A step toward the unknown, toward a freedom they could barely imagine. And all the while, the fake sky stretched above, a mocking reminder of the stars that weren't there. But maybe, just maybe, they'd find their way to them. One sarcastic comment, one rebellious act at a time. Karsten and Althea descended into the maintenance corridor, an unspectacular metal tunnel lined with pipes and circuits. The place hummed like an anxious beehive, and every rusty creak seemed like it was broadcasting their location to the custodians. Althea flicked a switch on a handheld flashlight, its beam cutting through the gloom. Welcome to the belly of the beast, she muttered. It's like industrial chic meets post-apocalyptic chic. Karsten snorted. Who knew our alien overlords had a thing for dystopian interior design? They probably got it on discount, Althea replied. I hear the galaxy's going through a recession. Even cosmic tyrants need to pinch pennies. They moved cautiously, aware that any misstep might lead to an abrupt and unpleasant encounter with alien security. Karsten fiddled with a device he'd pieced together from scrap. A rudimentary scanner, more hope than hardware, but it was all they had. Anything on that thing? Althea asked, trying to sound optimistic, failing spectacularly. About as much as my last attempt at a love life, Karsten said, fiddling some more. Lots of noise, little signal. They paused at an intersection where the corridor branched off into paths that looked almost identical, distinguished only by the grimy plaques above them. Right or left? Althea asked, or should we just spin in circles until we get dizzy and pick whichever way we fall? Karsten pondered, then shrugged. Left. If we're going down, let's at least go down with a sense of direction. They turned left, the corridor stretching ahead, unwelcoming and mysterious. The air was cooler here, tinged with the scent of machine oil and something else, something almost earthy. It was odd, given that the only Earth was several miles above them on the orbital tower's surface. As they walked, Karsten couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Sure, they were always being watched, but this was different. Like the walls themselves were keeping tabs on them. A shiver crawled up his spine and settled at the base of his skull. Hey, he said, breaking the silence that had become increasingly oppressive. You ever get the sense this place is more alive than it lets on? Althea glanced around. Alive? Like haunted? No, not haunted, just observant. You're not going philosophical on me, are you? She teased, though her eyes flicked around, as if seeing the corridor anew. Just paranoid, he replied. But then again, paranoia's just survival instincts with a bad reputation. They pressed on, Karsten occasionally fiddling with his scanner, hoping for a breakthrough. After several silent minutes, the device pinged, a shrill, insistent sound that was both exhilarating and terrifying. Got something, he said, half expecting the device to burst into flames out of spite. Althea peered over his shoulder. What is it? Location of the mythical chocolate cake stash? Better. Anomalous readings, Karsten said, excitement creeping into his voice. Some kind of energy fluctuation, just ahead. Ever wonder if curiosity killed the cat because the cat got bored? Althea asked, but there was a spark in her eye. The thrill of discovery, even if it might lead to their doom. All the time, Karsten grinned. Let's go find out if we're cats. The source of the anomaly was located behind a door marked with warnings in a language neither of them could read. But danger signs were universal, bright red, with lots of exclamation points. Think they put those up for fun? Althea asked, hand on her hip. Probably just to mess with us, Karsten replied, though he hesitated before touching the door's controls. But if we don't look, we're just as blind as the day we arrived. Or we open it and find out we're living on borrowed time, Althea countered, but she nodded for him to proceed. The door slid open with a pneumatic hiss, revealing a chamber that made them both stop short. The walls were lined with screens, each displaying a different view of the orbital tower. Gardens, commons, private quarters, it was all there, a digital tapestry of their lives under glass. Welcome to the control room, Karsten said, voice dry as the fake desert section. Looks like they've got a reality TV obsession, Althea added, a chill settling in her bones. I hope for their sake it's getting good ratings. They stepped inside, drawn to the centerpiece of the room, a large, pulsating sphere of light that hovered above a console. It threw strange shadows across the walls, turning their world into a kaleidoscope of colors and shapes. What do you think it is? Althea asked, voice hushed. Well, Karsten said, it's either the brain of the operation or the world's fanciest lava lamp. Whatever it was, the sphere radiated a strange warmth, not unpleasant but unsettling in its unfamiliarity. As they approached, Karsten's scanner went wild, readings spiking off the charts. This is it, he breathed. This is controlling everything. The custodian's brain, Althea mused, eyeing it with a mix of awe and suspicion. And we just waltzed right in. Karsten examined the console beneath the sphere, his fingers twitching with the urge to poke at buttons and levers. But the stakes were high, and a misstep could bring their world crashing down. Think you can do anything with this? Althea asked, standing close enough to feel the sphere's buzz in her bones. I can try, Karsten said, though the confidence in his voice was fueled more by bravado than certainty. As he began to work, a series of alien symbols scrolled across the screens, indecipherable to human eyes. But beneath the gibberish was a pattern, a rhythm that Karsten could almost feel rather than see. Is it just me, Althea remarked, or does this look like the world's worst karaoke machine? Either that or it's plotting to overthrow the universe's supply of bad music, Karsten replied, face split by a grin as he tapped a sequence into the console. There was a pause, the kind that stretched until it snapped. Then the sphere flickered, the screens shifting, breaking into chaos before recalibrating. Images from outside, beyond the tower, beyond the illusion, flashed briefly, teasing glimpses of the real universe. Did you see that? Althea asked, her voice a mix of wonder and disbelief. Yeah, Karsten murmured, eyes wide. Stars. Real stars. But the moment was fleeting. The sphere stabilized, and the views of their digitized prison returned. The control room hummed, unperturbed by the brief revelation. Guess we're not losing our minds, Althea said. Just our freedom. Small victories, Karsten replied, though the ache of reality was setting in. They lingered, reluctant to leave but knowing they couldn't stay. The anomaly was real, the simulation deeper than they'd suspected. But any chance of escape lay tangled in alien technology beyond their comprehension. Time to go before they notice the inmates are playing with the keys, Althea said, pulling Karsten away from the console. Right, he agreed, though his mind was already churning, devising plans that barely held together. They retraced their steps back to the maintenance corridor, closing the door behind them with a sense of finality. But the seed of rebellion had been sown, and the knowledge that they were more than zoo exhibits fueled their resolve. What's the next step? Althea asked as they made their way back to the surface. Karsten considered their options, which were slim as ever. We find a way to use that control room. Turn this zoo into a circus. And hope we can juggle better than the custodians, Althea said, her laugh echoing down the corridor like a battle cry. As they emerged into the garden, the fake sun was setting, casting long shadows over the landscape. The custodians' drones hovered, ever vigilant, But Karsten and Althea moved with purpose, their steps lighter despite the weight of their discovery. For the first time in ages, the stars felt within reach. Not the pretend ones, but the real deal, out there waiting, if they could just find a way to tear down the walls of their cage. "Do you think we'll ever get out?" Althea asked, her voice both hopeful and resigned. Karsten looked up at the blank sky, the memory of real stars still burning in his mind. "If we don't," he said, "at least we'll make sure they never forget us." With that, they returned to their lives, the quiet revolution simmering beneath the surface. Because even in a world where laughter was forbidden and freedom a distant dream, a little defiance went a long way. And if their overlords were watching, they'd better be taking notes. Because Karsten and Althea had just begun to rewrite the script, and they weren't planning on sticking to the old lines. The maintenance corridor had returned to its usual state of grim monotony, a far cry from the digital fantasia glimpsed moments ago. Karsten and Althea trudged along, their minds abuzz with possibilities. Unfortunately, those possibilities were more about avoiding the metaphorical axe than wielding it. "So, what's the plan, Captain?" Althea asked, her tone dripping with enough sarcasm to corrode metal. Karsten scratched his head. "First step? Avoid getting turned into a space pancake by our gracious overlords." "Not bad," Althea nodded. "It's a low bar, but we can't all be high jumpers." They navigated through the labyrinthine corridors, their footsteps echoing like a poorly tuned symphony played by mice. The scanner, now silent, dangled uselessly from Karsten's belt. It had done its job, led them to the control room, but now, the next move was up to them. "Think they noticed our little field trip?" Althea asked, glancing around with the paranoia of someone who just remembered there's a test today. "Pretty sure they've got sensors up the wazoo," Karsten replied. "We're probably starring in their favorite soap opera by now." "Hope they're not expecting a happy ending," Althea said. "We're fresh out of those." Karsten chuckled, a sound tinged with equal parts amusement and dread. They reached a junction, the way forward marked by a familiar grime-covered plaque. "The route back to the surface. I say we head topside, act natural. Maybe they'll think we're just a couple of harmless idiots." "We are a couple of harmless idiots," Althea pointed out. "But yeah, let's give it a shot." Their ascent was uneventful, the corridor's oppressive hum gradually replaced by the gentle lilt of the simulated environment. The artificial sun had set, leaving the landscape bathed in a pale, silvery glow. The kind that hinted at romance in films but only served to remind Karsten of the cold realities of their situation. The drones floated by like mechanical jellyfish, their surveillance beams casting sweeping arcs across the makeshift world. Karsten and Althea moved through the shadows, sticking close to the perimeter as they made their way to the residential quarters. "We need allies," Karsten said, once they were safely within the confines of their modest living quarters. "People who know how to handle tech better than us." Althea raised an eyebrow. "You mean like the kind of techies who can break into alien control rooms without setting off alarms?" "Exactly, and preferably without getting us killed." "I might know a guy," Althea said, a sly grin spreading across her face. "Jarek. Bit of a recluse, but he's got a knack for hacking. Used to run scams back on Earth before the whole interstellar overlord thing." Karsten nodded, the plan forming like a half-baked cupcake in his mind, a bit lopsided, but potentially sweet. "Think you can get him on board?" "I'll need to sweet-talk him," Althea admitted. "And by sweet-talk, I mean bribe him with whatever's left of our caffeine rations." "That desperate, huh? You have no idea." Althea set off to recruit Jarek, leaving Karsten to stew in his thoughts. He paced the small room, its walls mockingly adorned with motivational posters. "Keep smiling, the universe is your oyster, you're never alone." If only they came with a how-to guide for overthrowing alien regimes. The door chimed, shaking him from his reverie. Althea returned with a wiry man in tow, his clothes a mishmash of patched fabrics and suspiciously out-of-season trends. Jarek looked like he'd stepped out of a thrift store explosion, but his eyes held a spark that promised mischief. "Karsten, meet Jarek," Althea said, gesturing with a flourish as if presenting a prize dog. Jarek gave a curt nod. "So, you need someone to poke around in the alien's brainbox, huh?" "You got it," Karsten replied, offering a handshake. "Think you can help?" "Can I? Sure. Will I?" "That's another story," Jarek said, scratching his chin. "What's in it for me?" "To be honest," Karsten said, we've got almost nothing to offer but a chance to stick it to our alien overlords. Maybe even find a way out of this place." Jarek chuckled dryly. "An offer no sane man can refuse. Good thing sanity's not my strong suit." With Jarek on board, the trio began scheming, plotting a way to exploit the control room's capabilities. But as with all grand plans, there were hiccups. Minor ones, like the fact that Karsten's scanner had started making a noise eerily similar to a cat in heat. "Forgot about that feature," Karsten grumbled, smacking the device until it became blissfully silent. "Must have been a bug." Jarek inspected the device, poking and prodding with the enthusiasm of a child with a new toy. "Looks like it's picking up interference. Could be the aliens trying to recalibrate their systems after our little visit." "So, they do know," Althea said, her smile grim. "We're on borrowed time. Then let's make it worth every damn second," Karsten replied. The next few days were a blur of cautious reconnaissance, daring exploits, and narrowly avoided disasters. They discovered the aliens had indeed intensified their surveillance, the drones now more numerous and their patrols more frequent. But Karsten, Althea, and Jarek pressed on, driven by a mixture of desperation and defiance. The control room became their battleground, each visit a calculated risk. Jarek worked his magic on the console, fingers dancing across alien symbols like a pianist playing a particularly spiteful piece. He managed to access subroutines, disable minor security measures, and even create temporary blind spots in the surveillance grid. But every victory was brief, the aliens quick to adapt, like a cosmic chess game where the opponent could read minds. Their attempts to disrupt the simulation met with limited success, often reset by the aliens as though undoing a child's messy scribbles. "Feels like we're trying to outsmart a particularly vindictive chess master," Karsten mused, after one such thwarted attempt. "Either that or we're just the world's worst chess players," Althea replied, not missing a beat. Despite setbacks, morale remained surprisingly high, buoyed by small wins and the thrill of rebellion. They'd managed to disrupt power to a section of the residential quarters once, plunging part of the simulation into darkness long enough to sow confusion. "Bet they weren't expecting a spontaneous blackout in paradise," Jarek quipped, his smile wolfish as he recounted the incident. "Little chaos is good for the soul. Or what's left of it," Althea added. "I think mine's been replaced with sarcasm and caffeine by now." Between their own machinations and the tightening grip of alien oversight, Karsten learned to appreciate the small moments of levity. Like Althea's ongoing commentary about the futility of simulated birds singing simulated songs or Jarek's insistence that their escapades were akin to an elaborate role-playing game. With much higher stakes, Karsten pointed out, as they prepared for another control room incursion. "Sure, but where's the fun if there's no risk?" Jarek replied with a wink. As they ventured once more into the depths, Karsten couldn't shake the feeling that their time was running out. The aliens had grown suspicious, and it was only a matter of time before they took decisive action. "Think we're close to pushing them over the edge?" Althea asked, her voice a mix of hope and dread. "Hard to say," Karsten answered. "But if they push, we push back." Their latest visit to the control room was tense, the air thick with the unspoken knowledge that this could be their last. Jarek worked quickly, his fingers a blur as he navigated the alien interface. Karsten and Althea stood watch, ears attuned to any sound out of place. The screens flickered, alien symbols rearranging as Jarek executed his latest scheme. A hush fell over the room, the kind that heralded either triumph or disaster. Karsten held his breath, waiting for the universe to tip its hand. Then, the lights dimmed, plunging the room into semi-darkness. A low hum vibrated through the floor, the kind that made your bones itch and your thoughts scatter like leaves in a storm. "Did you just?" Althea began, but Jarek's grin cut her off. "Initiated a cascade failure protocol," Jarek announced, as if he'd just won a lottery. "Should keep them busy for a while." The screens displayed a kaleidoscope of chaos, systems overloading, functions crashing. Karsten's heart pounded in his chest, caught between exhilaration and terror. "Busy enough for us to make a run for it?" Karsten asked, the idea both thrilling and insane. "Maybe," Jarek said, his voice laced with mad glee. "If we're lucky." Luck, of course, was a fickle thing. But Karsten knew this was their shot, the chance to break free, to see the real stars again, to taste freedom even if it was just a fleeting sip. "Time to go, then," Althea said, that familiar spark dancing in her eyes. With Jarek's handiwork wreaking havoc on the alien systems, they turned and fled, adrenaline fueling their escape. Behind them, the control room continued its descent into disarray, a digital storm that promised either salvation or swift retribution. The corridors blurred past, a maze they navigated by instinct and memory. Karsten felt the world shift beneath their feet, the simulation groaning as if awakening to their presence, to their defiance. They emerged into the open, the fake night sky stretched above them like a mocking canvas. But now, armed with knowledge and a measure of rebellion, Karsten felt the weight of the ceiling a little less. "So, any regrets?" Jarek asked, as they paused to catch their breath. "Only that we didn't bring snacks," Althea replied, her laugh a defiant peal that echoed across the false landscape. Karsten smiled, the weight of their journey settling into a manageable burden. "Let's make them regret underestimating us." With renewed resolve, the trio moved forward, each step a testament to their will to fight, to resist, to reclaim what had been taken. The odds were against them, the risks astronomical, but they were human, stubborn, resourceful, and more than a little reckless. And as they plotted their next move under the indifferent gaze of the drones, Karsten knew one thing for certain: they weren't done yet. The stars were still out there, waiting. And so were they. Karsten leaned against the cool metallic wall of the maintenance corridor, feeling the comforting hum of machinery through his spine. The place stank of burnt circuits and something unusually close to wet dog, but at least it was a step up from the cloyingly fake floral air of the simulated paradise. He watched Althea pace, her face a study in fuming impatience. "We need more people," she declared, breaking the silence. Her voice was a hammer striking decisiveness out of the air. "The three of us are good, but not overthrow an alien regime, good." Karsten sighed, feeling the weight of leadership settling like a particularly fat cat on his shoulders. "Right, people. Like who?" "Zane," Althea replied, as if the name alone was a magic spell. "Zane?" Karsten repeated, incredulous. "The guy's got the personality of a malfunctioning toaster. I doubt he'll be thrilled about joining our merry band of misfits." "Yeah, but he's a damn good hacker, and we need more of that," Althea countered, her eyes flashing with the reckless enthusiasm Karsten had come to both admire and dread. Karsten scratched his chin, considering. Zane was known for two things: his ability to crack any digital lock, and his tendency to make a conversation feel like a root canal. But desperate times called for desperate allies. "Fine, let's see if we can bring him on board," Karsten relented. "But if he starts quoting binary at me, I'm out." Althea gave a sly grin. "I'll handle him. Just don't let him scare you off with his charm." Karsten smirked. "Charm? From Zane? I'd sooner expect a drone to break into song." The task of recruiting Zane fell to Althea, who disappeared into the guts of the orbital tower. Karsten busied himself with the scanner, trying to coax it into some semblance of functionality. The thing was more temperamental than a cat on catnip, and just about as useful in a crisis. Jarek, ever the optimist, was sprawled across the floor, tinkering with a pile of stolen alien tech. "You know," he began, not looking up, "if we don't pull this off, at least we'll go down in history as the most annoying humans alive." "Gee, thanks for the pep talk," Karsten replied dryly. "Just what I needed." Jarek chuckled, a sound that had more than a hint of lunacy. "It's what I'm here for. That and blowing stuff up." An hour later, Althea returned, dragging Zane behind her like a reluctant cat on a leash. True to form, Zane looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, preferably somewhere that didn't involve human interaction. "Karsten, meet Zane," Althea announced, gesturing grandly. Zane gave a nod, the bare minimum of acknowledgement. "Heard you need someone to poke around in the alien's digital underwear drawer." Karsten raised an eyebrow. "We need more than just poking. We need tearing, ripping, and possibly setting it on fire." Zane's lips twitched into something that might have been a smile in another universe. "Sounds like a fun Friday night. And what do you want in return?" Karsten asked, bracing himself for an outlandish request. "Peace and quiet," Zane deadpanned. "But I'll settle for not getting caught." With Zane begrudgingly on board, the group expanded their operations, each new addition a vital cog in their sputtering machine of a rebellion. Karsten marveled at the camaraderie forming amidst the chaos. A ragtag family united by mutual desperation and a fondness for dark humor. Their efforts grew bolder. With Zane's help, They managed to tap into the alien surveillance network, creating more frequent blind spots and even accessing snippets of alien communications. The aliens, predictably, weren't thrilled. Security tightened, drones buzzed like angry mechanical wasps, and any slip-up could lead to a swift, unpleasant end. They all felt the pressure, a constant companion that gnawed at nerves and frayed tempers. But they also felt the thrill, an intoxicating cocktail of fear and hope, spiked with a dash of madness. One night, as they gathered in the dim glow of the control room, Althea spoke up. "Ever think about what you'd do if we actually pull this off?" "Retire to a nice quiet planet," Karsten replied, "preferably one where the residents don't have tentacles." "Assuming they let us," Zane added, his voice as flat as his gaze. Jarek chuckled, spinning a screwdriver like a gunslinger. "I'm aiming for a tropical paradise. Plenty of sun, no obligations, and a ridiculous amount of fruity drinks." Karsten smiled, despite himself. "You know, I'd settle for just seeing the real sky." Their laughter was short-lived, quickly swallowed by the oppressive weight of their reality. But for those brief moments, it made the endless fight seem almost survivable. The next few days passed in a blur of calculated chaos. With Zane's expertise, they breached deeper into the alien systems, creating more disruptions, more blackouts, more confusion. The aliens responded with increasing aggression, their frustration palpable in the tightening noose of their defenses. Yet the tide had shifted. Where once there had been hesitance, now there was determination. Where there had been fear, now there was fire, a fire kindled by shared laughter and stubborn hope. Karsten felt it every time they gathered to plot their next move. The way Althea's eyes danced with mischief, the way Jarek's grin promised mischief. Even Zane, with all his stoic detachment, seemed to thrive amidst the chaos. One particularly tense evening, as they huddled around a map of the tower's labyrinthine corridors, Althea pointed to a section marked with bold red lines. "Here," she said, tapping emphatically. "If we can shut this sector down, it'll give us an opening." Karsten studied the map, his mind racing. "But it'll only work if we time it just right. One mistake, and we're toast." "No pressure, then," Jarek quipped. "Never is," Zane murmured, focusing on his tablet. Karsten took a deep breath, the weight of their daring plan pressing on him like a lead blanket. "Okay, let's do it." Their preparations were meticulous, a series of carefully synchronized steps designed to outwit an enemy who seemed to always be one step ahead. As the day of their operation dawned, Karsten felt a strange calm settle over him, a clarity that came from knowing they were on the knife's edge. The air crackled with tension as they executed their plan. Alarms blared, lights flickered, and chaos reigned as systems crashed and drones scrambled to regain control. In the midst of it all, Karsten found himself grinning, madness and exhilaration blending into a heady cocktail. As they made their way through the corridors, Zane's voice crackled over their comms. "Sector's dark. You have a window. Let's hope it's not painted shut," Althea muttered, her voice a mix of nerves and determination. They moved like shadows, slipping through the gaps in the aliens' defenses with a combination of skill and sheer audacity. Karsten's heart hammered in his chest, each beat echoing the countdown to their success or failure. When they finally reached their target, the control room's core systems, Karsten's hands moved with a confidence born of desperation. They worked quickly, disabling key functions and rerouting power, each step a small victory in their uphill battle. As the system overload reached a crescendo, Jarek let out a whoop of triumph. "We did it," Zane's voice crackled in response, a rare trace of satisfaction coloring his tone. For now, Karsten caught Althea's eye, sharing a moment of unspoken understanding. They'd done the impossible, again. But the real challenge lay ahead, in whatever retaliation the aliens would devise. As they made their way back to safety, the knowledge of what they'd achieved buoyed them, even as the specter of what was to come loomed large. They'd poked the beast, and it was only a matter of time before it lashed out. But for the first time, Karsten felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in a long time: hope. Fragile, fleeting, but there nonetheless. A hope that they could keep pushing, keep fighting, until the stars were once again theirs to claim. When they gathered later, catching their breath and reviewing the day's exploits, Althea raised an imaginary glass. "To us," she said, her voice wry but sincere. "The most stubborn, reckless bunch of humans in the galaxy." Karsten laughed, a sound rich and genuine. And may we continue to annoy the hell out of our alien overlords. As their laughter echoed through the room, dark humor and camaraderie mingling in the air, Karsten knew they weren't alone. They were a ragtag band of rebels, united by desperation and defiance, and against all odds, they had made their mark. The road ahead was uncertain, fraught with danger and unknowns. But they faced it together, with fire in their hearts and mischief in their eyes, humans, flawed and irreverent, ready to rewrite their stars. The aliens, it seemed, were not fond of being outsmarted by a ragtag bunch of humans. They'd responded to the recent breaches with a counter-offensive that could only be described as overkill. Drones buzzed incessantly around the orbital tower like mechanical mosquitoes with a vendetta, and security checks became as frequent as Althea's snarky remarks. Karsten and his crew found themselves backed into a corner, both literally and metaphorically. The control room had become their makeshift headquarters, but now it felt more like a gilded cage. The moment they attempted to step out, alarms would scream louder than a banshee with a megaphone. "Well, this is cozy," Althea remarked, her voice dripping with sarcasm as she surveyed their cramped surroundings. "I always dreamed of spending my last days trapped in a glorified broom closet." Jarek, ever the optimist, tried to lighten the mood. "Look on the bright side. At least we won't have to worry about getting sunburned. Or social interactions," Zane added, his face illuminated by the dull glow of his tablet. "I could get used to this." Karsten, however, wasn't in the mood for jokes. He was nursing an injury he'd acquired during their last escapade, a nasty gash on his arm that throbbed with every beat of his heart. It served as a painful reminder that they were outmatched and outgunned. "How's the scanner?" Karsten asked, more out of habit than hope. The device had been their lifeline, a way to keep tabs on their alien overlords, but it had been acting up lately, as temperamental as an old lawnmower. Jarek shook his head, disassembling the scanner for what felt like the 100th time. "It's on strike, demanding better working conditions and a pay raise." Karsten chuckled, despite himself. "Great, even our techs got an attitude." As the days dragged on, the group's morale sank faster than a lead balloon in a vacuum. Communication lines had been severed, isolating them from potential allies and leaving them blind to the aliens' movements. It was as if the universe had decided to throw a cosmic middle finger their way. "We need a new plan," Althea said, pacing back and forth like a caged animal. "Sitting here twiddling our thumbs is just gonna get us killed." "And what do you suggest?" Zane asked, not looking up from his screen. "Waltz out there and ask the aliens for a timeout?" Althea rolled her eyes. "I'm open to suggestions, genius." Jarek set down his tools, looking uncharacteristically serious. "We could try a distraction. Something big enough to draw their attention away, give us a chance to regroup." "Like what?" Karsten asked, wincing as he adjusted his bandage. "We'd need something flashy, something they'd notice. How about a big, shiny explosion?" Jarek suggested, his grin returning with a manic edge. Karsten sighed. "And here I thought you were the sensible one." They spent the next few hours brainstorming, their ideas ranging from the absurd to the downright suicidal. The aliens had them boxed in, and every potential escape route was guarded by security measures more advanced than anything humans had dreamed up. "Feels like we're stuck in a bad video game," Althea muttered, frustration creeping into her tone. "Yeah, and the devs nerfed all the fun," Zane replied, tapping away at his tablet with grim determination. Karsten rubbed his temples, trying to ignore the persistent throb of his injury. "We can't stay here much longer. Sooner or later, they're going to come for us. Then we need to hit them where it hurts," Althea said, her eyes blazing with defiance. "Make them regret underestimating us." "Easy to say, harder to do," Karsten said. "But you're right, we've got to do something." Their situation was dire, and it was clear that they couldn't rely on good fortune alone to see them through. Desperation was a lousy ally, but it was all they had. The next day dawned with an eerie calm, the kind that made Karsten's skin crawl. It was the calm before the storm. He could feel it in his bones, and it was only a matter of time before the aliens unleashed whatever hell they'd been cooking up. "We need to make a move," Karsten said, gathering the others around. "We can't wait for them to come to us. We need to act." "Any brilliant ideas?" Zane asked, looking up from his tablet with a raised eyebrow. Karsten shook his head. "No brilliance here, just a dangerous level of optimism." Jarek grinned. "That's the spirit. Their plan was slapdash at best, a desperate gamble that relied more on luck than strategy. But it was all they had, and in their line of work, the dice were always loaded. As they prepared to execute their plan, Karsten couldn't shake the feeling that they were marching into a trap. The aliens were too quiet, their movements too calculated. It was as if they were waiting for the humans to make the first move, and that was never a good sign. But there was no turning back now. They were committed, for better or worse, and the only way out was through. "Let's give them hell," Althea said, her voice steady and resolute. "Right back at him," Jarek agreed, checking his equipment one last time. Zane, ever the cynic, simply nodded. "Hope they like surprises." With that, they set off, moving through the corridors like ghosts, each step a testament to their resolve. The maintenance corridor was as unwelcoming as ever, its metallic walls cool to the touch and its scent a unique blend of burnt circuits and wet dog. As they advanced, Karsten's injury flared up, each step sending jolts of pain radiating through his arm. He gritted his teeth, refusing to let it slow him down. They needed every advantage they could get, and he wasn't about to let them down. Their destination was a section of the tower's infrastructure, a weak point they'd identified during one of Zane's digital forays. If they could disable it, even temporarily, it might give them the breathing space they desperately needed. But as they approached, it became clear that their plan had not gone unnoticed. Drones hovered in the distance, their mechanical hum a menacing reminder of the opposition they faced. "Looks like they rolled out the welcome mat," Jarek said, his tone darkly amused. "Always nice to feel appreciated," Althea shot back, her grip tightening on her weapon. As they moved into position, Karsten felt the weight of their situation press down on him like a leaden cloak. There was no room for error, no margin for failure. Their lives, and the lives of countless others, hung in the balance. "Ready?" Karsten asked, his voice steady despite the turmoil churning inside him. The others nodded, their expressions grim but determined. They were in this together, come what may. The operation began with a flash of light and a cacophony of noise as they unleashed their distraction. Explosions rocked the corridor, sending debris and dust billowing into the air. Alarms blared, drowning out all other sounds, as the alien drones scrambled to respond. "That's our cue," Zane said, his voice crackling over the comms. They moved quickly, slipping through the chaos they'd created like shadows in the night. The drones, momentarily disoriented, buzzed wildly as they attempted to regain control of the situation. Karsten led the charge, his injury temporarily forgotten in the adrenaline-fueled rush. They reached their target, a crucial control panel, just as the dust began to settle. "Time to make some noise," Jarek said, his fingers flying over the controls with practiced ease. As they worked, Karsten kept a wary eye on their surroundings, his senses on high alert for any sign of the inevitable retaliation. The seconds stretched into an eternity as they waited, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Just as they finished, the drones regrouped, their mechanical eyes fixed on the intruders with unnerving precision. "Move," Althea shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. They sprinted back the way they'd come, the drones hot on their heels. The corridors echoed with the sound of pursuit, a cacophony of desperation and determination. Karsten's injury flared anew, the pain a constant companion as they raced for safety. But he pushed through it, driven by the knowledge that they couldn't afford to fail. They reached the safety of their makeshift headquarters just as the drones closed in, the door slamming shut behind them with a satisfying thunk. "That was close," Jarek said, his words punctuated by heavy breaths. "Too close," Karsten agreed, leaning against the wall as he caught his breath. Althea, ever the pragmatist, took stock of their situation. "We bought ourselves some time, but it's not going to last. They'll be back, and next time they'll be ready for us." Zane nodded, his expression unreadable. "We need a new plan." Karsten, exhausted but unbowed, felt a flicker of hope. They'd faced impossible odds before and come out the other side. They could do it again. "Let's regroup," he said, his voice steady despite the uncertainty that lay ahead. "Figure out our next move." As they settled in, the weight of their predicament hung over them like a storm cloud, but beneath it flickered the spark of defiance. A reminder that they were still in the fight, and that they wouldn't go down without a struggle. Because if there was one thing Karsten and his crew excelled at, it was being a thorn in the side of their alien overlords. And they weren't about to stop now. Not while there was still the faintest glimmer of hope on the horizon. The room was silent, save for the occasional hum of alien tech and the soft, persistent beeping of the scanner trying to convince itself it was still relevant. Karsten, his arm cradled in an improvised sling made from a piece of what he hoped wasn't Jarek's underwear, gazed at the faces around him. They all looked exhausted, their eyes carrying the weight of 1,000 sleepless nights and a few too many close calls. "All right, folks," Althea said, breaking the silence like a brick through a window. "We need a plan, and we need it yesterday. You got something in mind, or are we playing another round of who can suggest the dumbest idea?" Zane replied, not bothering to look up from his tablet where he was probably playing solitaire instead of hacking alien drones. "Actually, yes," Althea said, her voice carrying that familiar edge that usually preceded either a brilliant idea or a particularly boneheaded move. "We've been thinking like humans trying to outsmart other humans. What if we tried thinking like humans trying to outsmart aliens?" Karsten raised an eyebrow, a risky maneuver considering his arm situation. "You suggesting we try to confuse them with our superior sense of style?" "Close," Althea shot back with a grin. "I'm talking about unpredictability, emotion, things they don't quite get. We hit them where it hurts, right in the does not compute circuits." Jarek, ever the optimist, looked intrigued. "You're saying we exploit their lack of understanding of what makes us tick?" "Precisely," Althea confirmed, looking dangerously pleased with herself. "We give them a taste of good old-fashioned human madness." Zane finally tore his eyes away from his screen. "And how do you propose we do that? By having a group therapy session mid-battle?" "Maybe not that far," she replied dryly. "But we can start by playing on their expectations. We cause chaos, make them react instead of act." Karsten nodded slowly, the beginnings of an idea taking shape in his mind. Something they can't predict, something that makes them question if they've bitten off more than they can chew. "Exactly," Althea said, her eyes gleaming with a kind of manic excitement that usually resulted in a healthy dose of chaos. "So, what do you say?" The room fell silent as they considered the proposal, each weighing the risks against the slim chance of success. It was a plan that relied heavily on human nature, their greatest strength and their greatest weakness. "All right," Karsten said finally, a smile creeping onto his face despite the pain. "Let's give it a shot. Worst-case scenario, we all die a little more interestingly than planned." "I'll drink to that," Jarek said, raising an imaginary glass. "Though I'd prefer something stronger than recycled air." The group began to rally, drawing strength from their shared determination and the unyielding spirit that had kept them alive thus far. They had nothing to lose and everything to gain, and that made them dangerous in a way the aliens couldn't possibly understand. "What's the first step?" Zane asked, his fingers already dancing across his tablet, presumably checking schedules for the next interstellar crisis. "We start by taking advantage of their security protocols," Althea said, laying out a rough map of the orbital tower. "They think they know all our moves, so we give them something new to chew on." Jarek looked over the map, then back at Althea. "Like a flash mob, but with more explosions and less Kanye?" "Exactly," Althea replied, her grin widening. "We spread out, hit different points at once, make them scramble. They're not used to unpredictability. They don't know what to do with it. We can use the custodians against them," Karsten added, his mind already spinning through potential strategies. "They're programmed to maintain the simulation, but what happens if we overload their systems?" Zane smirked, clearly enjoying the prospect of some digital mayhem. "Turn their paradise into a nightmare, huh? I like the way you think." "Then it's settled," Karsten said, feeling the energy in the room shift from desperation to determination. "We take the fight to them and show them what humanity's really made of." With their focus renewed, the group began hashing out the details of their plan, each contributing ideas and suggestions until a rough framework emerged. It was risky, perhaps even bordering on suicidal, but it was a hell of a lot better than sitting around waiting for the inevitable. As they reviewed their strategy, Karsten felt a flicker of hope, a stubborn ember refusing to be snuffed out. They'd faced impossible odds before, and they'd survived. Maybe, just maybe, they could pull this off too. "Everyone clear on what they need to do?" Althea asked, her eyes scanning the room for any sign of hesitation. "Clear as a politician's conscience," Jarek replied cheerfully. "Let's just hope we don't need to rely on any unexpected allies," Zane said, his tone tinged with skepticism. Desperate times might call for desperate allies, but I'm not interested in meeting new friends. That makes two of us, Karsten agreed. But if we're going to do this, we need to be ready for anything. The room was charged with a sense of anticipation, a shared understanding that they were on the brink of something big. They didn't know what lay ahead, but they were ready to face it together. As the group prepared to move out, Karsten took a moment to reflect on their journey. They'd come a long way from where they'd started, beaten and bruised but never broken. It was a testament to their resilience, their refusal to be cowed by the odds stacked against them. "All right, team," he said, his voice steady despite the uncertainty that lay ahead. "Let's show these bastards what it means to mess with humanity." They moved out, each taking up their assigned positions with a sense of purpose that belied the danger they faced. The maintenance corridor was as unwelcoming as ever, its metallic walls and burnt circuit smell a reminder of the challenges they'd overcome. As they advanced, the sound of alien drones buzzing overhead served as a constant reminder of the opposition they faced. But the group pushed on, their spirits buoyed by the belief that they could still make a difference. Jarek was the first to reach his target, a junction box that controlled part of the simulated environment. With a few deft movements, he set to work, his fingers flying over the controls with practiced ease. Almost there, he muttered to himself, sweat beading on his forehead as he worked. The seconds ticked by with agonizing slowness, each one a reminder of the urgency of their mission. Meanwhile, Althea had positioned herself at another critical point, her eyes scanning the area for any sign of trouble. The tension in the air was palpable, a constant reminder that they were walking a razor's edge. "Jarek, you good?" she asked over the comms, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "Almost," came the reply, his tone a mix of concentration and determination. "Just need a little more time. Make it quick," Zane chimed in, his voice crackling over the airwaves. "We've got company." Drones began to swarm the area, their mechanical eyes fixed on the intruders with unnerving precision. But the group was ready, their plan designed to exploit the aliens' weaknesses and turn the tide in their favor. Karsten, watching from a position near the central control hub, felt a surge of pride as he saw his team in action. They were a motley crew, to be sure, but they were his crew, and they were damn good at what they did. With a final flourish, Jarek completed his task, the junction box sparking to life as it overloaded. Althea followed suit, her own target succumbing to her practiced skill and determination. As the custodians struggled to compensate for the sudden influx of data, the simulated environment began to glitch and falter, the alien paradise unraveling at the seams. "Now that's what I call a work of art," Zane said, his tone laced with satisfaction. "Let's see them try to fix that." "Time to move," Karsten said, his voice cutting through the chaos. "We've done our part. Let's get out of here." They retreated, their movements synchronized and efficient as they navigated the corridors with practiced ease. The drones, momentarily disoriented, buzzed wildly as they attempted to regain control. As the group regrouped in their makeshift headquarters, Karsten allowed himself a moment of relief. They'd done it. They'd struck a blow against their alien overlords, and they'd done it on their own terms. But the fight wasn't over yet. They still had a long way to go, and the path ahead was fraught with danger. But for the first time in a long time, Karsten felt a glimmer of hope, a belief that they could still make a difference. "We're not out of the woods yet," Althea said, her eyes scanning the room for any sign of dissent. "But we've shown them what we're capable of. And we'll keep showing them," Jarek added, his voice carrying the same unyielding determination that had seen them through so many trials before. Zane nodded, his expression unreadable but his resolve clear. "We've made them think twice. Now we just need to keep them guessing." Karsten looked around at the faces of his team, their expressions a mix of exhaustion and defiance. They'd come this far, and they weren't about to back down now. "Let's regroup," he said, his voice steady despite the uncertainty that lay ahead. "Figure out our next move." As they settled in, the weight of their predicament hung over them like a storm cloud, but beneath it flickered the spark of defiance. A reminder that they were still in the fight, and that they wouldn't go down without a struggle. Because if there was one thing Karsten and his crew excelled at, it was being a thorn in the side of their alien overlords. And they weren't about to stop now. Not while there was still the faintest glimmer of hope on the horizon. The control room had seen better days, but then again, so had Karsten. He looked around at his crew, who, despite the odds, had managed to make this tin can tower feel like home. Well, a home with the constant threat of alien extermination, but home nonetheless. He adjusted his improvised sling, trying not to think about the fact that it was made from Jarek's underwear. "So, we're clear on the plan?" Karsten asked, glancing over at Althea, who was busy turning a collection of wires and circuits into something that might just save their lives. Or at the very least, delay their inevitable demise. Clearer than a bureaucrat's conscience, Althea responded, not looking up from her work. If anyone could turn the aliens' own tech against them, it was her. She had a knack for chaos that even the most complicated systems couldn't withstand. "And you're sure they won't see this coming?" Zane asked, finally looking up from his tablet. He'd been playing solitaire, but anyone who mistook him for lazy was sorely mistaken. He was deathly clever, and the best digital saboteur this side of the galaxy. If their idea of unpredictability is the occasional power fluctuation, then yeah, I'd say we're way off their radar, Althea replied, her grin as sharp as her wit. "Good. Then let's show these bastards what a real glitch looks like," Jarek chimed in, his usual optimism painting a stark contrast against the grim situation. He'd always been the team's morale booster, a role that required a special kind of insanity. The plan was simple, which was exactly what made it dangerous. Each of them would hit a different control point, overloading the custodian systems with a barrage of illogical actions, something the analytics-driven aliens couldn't predict if their lives depended on it. And with any luck, they might just make the whole damn simulation come crashing down around them. They moved out with the kind of focus that only came from staring death in the face on a daily basis. The maintenance corridor stretched before them, its cool metal panels and burnt circuit smell a constant reminder of their past failures and victories. If there was any poetry to be found in this grim place, it was probably written in the language of old code and forgotten wiring. "Remember, no heroics," Karsten reminded them, knowing full well that asking for restraint from this group was like asking a star to stop burning. "We make our move, we get out. It's that simple." "Simple as a politician's promise," Zane muttered, earning a chuckle from Jarek. The corridors were eerily quiet, save for the distant hum of alien tech, a sound that had become as familiar as their own heartbeats. Althea led the way, her flashlight cutting through the gloom as they approached their designated targets. Karsten took his position near the central hub, the scanner in his good hand emitting a soft, persistent beat that was oddly comforting. It was a reminder that for all the advanced tech the aliens had brought with them, they were still vulnerable to the oldest human trick in the book: unpredictability. Jarek reached his junction box first, his fingers flying over the controls with a flair that suggested he was either a mad genius or just plain mad. Either way, it seemed to be working. "Time to give them a taste of their own medicine," he murmured to himself, triggering the first of many distractions. Althea was next, her target a control panel that, in theory, managed the simulated sky. In practice, it was about to become the linchpin of their operation. With a deft flick of her wrist, she launched a series of nonsensical commands, the panel sputtering in protest as it struggled to keep up. "Looks like it's starting to rain cats and code," Zane quipped, monitoring the chaos from his tablet. The sky on the display was already flickering, an ominous sign of things to come. Meanwhile, Karsten was busy keeping an eye on the drones. They buzzed around the corridor like mechanical mosquitoes, their sensors scanning for any sign of trouble. But Karsten was ready, his rudimentary scanner feeding them just enough false data to keep them chasing shadows. "How we doing?" Althea's voice crackled over the comms, tight with concentration but not without its usual edge of sarcasm. "Jarek's got them chasing their tails," Karsten replied, watching as the drones zigzagged in confusion. "And you?" "I've got them seeing double," she said, her grin audible even over the static. "They're scrambling to reset the sky parameters. Should give us enough time to hit the next phase." "Good. Zane, you in position?" Karsten asked, knowing full well that if anyone could hack the system under pressure, it was Zane. "Already there. Just waiting for the fireworks," Zane replied, his fingers tapping out commands faster than most people could blink. And here we go. The control room lights flickered ominously as the custodians struggled to process the overload of illogical inputs. Panels sparked and sputtered, their usual precision giving way to chaos. It was beautiful in a destructive kind of way, like watching a star go supernova in real time. Now that's what I call progress, Jarek said, unable to hide his satisfaction as the first alarms began to blare. Time to move, people, Karsten ordered, his voice cutting through the cacophony like a knife through butter. We've done our part. Let's not overstay our welcome. They retreated with practiced efficiency, each of them knowing their part in this intricate dance of survival. Behind them, the simulation continued to falter, the alien paradise unraveling at the seams as the custodians struggled to contain the chaos. Back in their makeshift headquarters, the team regrouped, breathless but exhilarated. They'd struck a blow against their alien overlords, and they'd done it with nothing more than human ingenuity and a healthy disregard for authority. Well, that was fun, Althea said, collapsing into a chair with a victorious grin. Think they'll be inviting us back? Only if they want a repeat performance, Jarek replied, his laugh tempered by the weight of what they'd achieved. We made them think twice. Now we just need to keep them guessing, Zane added, his expression unreadable but his resolve clear. Karsten looked around at his crew, their faces a mix of exhaustion and determination. They'd come this far, and they weren't about to back down now. We've shown them what we're capable of, he said, his voice steady despite the uncertainty that lay ahead. Now let's see if they can keep up. As they settled in to plan their next move, the weight of their predicament hung over them like a storm cloud. But beneath it flickered the spark of defiance, a reminder that they were still in the fight, and that they wouldn't go down without a struggle. Because if there was one thing Karsten and his crew excelled at, it was being a thorn in the side of their alien overlords. And they weren't about to stop now. So, what's next? Althea asked, her eyes bright with a mix of adrenaline and mischief. We regroup, figure out our next move, Karsten replied, his mind already spinning with possibilities. We've got them on the ropes. Now we just need to figure out how to land the knockout punch. Sounds like a plan, Jarek said, his smile as infectious as ever. And hey, if all else fails, at least we'll go down swinging. Yeah, nothing like a good old-fashioned brawl to get the blood pumping, Zane added, his tone laced with the kind of dark humor that only came from living on the edge. Karsten couldn't help but chuckle, despite the gravity of their situation. They were a ragtag bunch, to be sure, but they were his ragtag bunch. And damn it, they were good at what they did. As they hunkered down to plan their next move, the room was filled with a sense of anticipation. They didn't know what lay ahead, but they were ready to face it together. All right, team, Karsten said, his voice carrying the weight of their shared determination. Let's show these bastards what it means to mess with humanity. The fight was far from over, but for the first time in a long time, they had the upper hand. And as long as they had that, they had hope. The orbital tower was now, in the most ironic sense, under human control. So far, the victory felt less like an all-conquering triumph and more like inheriting a haunted house. The alien technology hummed menacingly, as if offended by its new management. Hell of a fixer-upper we've got here, Althea said, staring at the control room's flickering displays. Do you think we could get a discount if we complain to the universe's landlord? Karsten adjusted his sling, still a dubious piece of practical art sourced from Jarek's unmentionables. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that the universe doesn't do refunds. Around them, the rest of the crew was busy dismantling and deciphering the alien tech. Jarek was running around like a hyperactive squirrel with a death wish, pulling wires and punching buttons with reckless abandon. Zane, on the other hand, had his nose stuck in his tablet, occasionally muttering things like, "This code's older than my grandmother's bad knee." Sorcery, each line of it, Zane added, shaking his head. But we'll figure it out. If a species evolved to think in straight lines, then curves are gonna blow their minds. Althea snorted. So, we hit them where it hurts, their inability to appreciate abstract art. We've turned the museum upside down. Let's show them what happens when we start painting with a mop. Karsten surveyed the room, a proud, albeit weary, smile tugging at his lips. They'd done what seemed impossible, and under the fluorescent lights of this dystopian jungle gym, the ragtag crew felt a semblance of hope. Outside the control room, the fake paradise they'd been trapped in for so long began to dissolve, taking its artificial charm with it. The simulated sky, once a serene shade of blue, now flickered erratically like a broken television set from hell. Looks like the sky's having a midlife crisis, Jarek quipped, tapping a panel with the elegance of a drunken pianist. Yep, just realized it's not actually a sky, Althea replied, her tone filled with mock sympathy. The corridors of the tower, usually so sterile and uniform, were becoming more chaotic with each passing minute. Alarms blared intermittently, and the ever-present drones flitted about like drunken bumblebees, struggling to reconcile their programming with the new reality. Karsten wiped the sweat from his brow, the gravity of the situation finally catching up to him. We've got to dismantle this tech before they realize what's happened and send reinforcements. Great, just what I always wanted to do with my life, Zane said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Dismantle alien tech without the user manual. Look at it this way, Karsten replied, at least they didn't password protect their systems. Well, they did, but their idea of a strong password was, password 123 feet, Zane shot back with a grin. With the tower's systems slowly surrendering to their whims, it was time to turn their attention to freeing the other humans trapped within this celestial madhouse. They'd need all hands on deck if they were going to dismantle the alien technology for good. Let's get to work, Karsten said, rallying his crew with a look that brooked no argument. We've got a planet full of people to save. As they spread out through the tower, Althea and Karsten found themselves in one of the more remote sections, a storage area, filled with alien contraptions that looked suspiciously like medieval torture devices. Or maybe modern art, hard to tell with these guys. You ever get the feeling we're just bugs in a jar to them? Althea mused, her fingers deftly at work disconnecting a particularly nasty-looking piece of tech. More like the ants they're trying to drown with a garden hose, Karsten replied, prying open a panel to reveal a tangle of wires. But hey, it's always fun ruining someone's picnic. Their banter was interrupted by a sudden commotion further down the corridor. The sound of voices, human voices, spurred them into action. As they approached, they saw a small group of survivors, huddled together amidst the chaos. Look who's made it to the party, Althea announced, earning a few startled glances from the newcomers. Didn't realize we were on the guest list, one of them managed, a lanky man with a face like a beaten shoe but a fire in his eyes nonetheless. Don't worry, we're the entertainment, Karsten assured them. We specialize in making life hell for our hosts. With their help, the process of dismantling the alien tech went faster. It was amazing what a little desperation and a lot of human ingenuity could accomplish. Pretty soon, the tower's systems were unraveling at the seams, each piece of alien tech dissected and repurposed to their advantage. Just think, Zane said as he worked, all this could have been avoided if those aliens had just left us alone. Yeah, Jarek agreed, but where's the fun in that? He paused to admire his handiwork. Besides, we've given them a show they'll never forget. With the tech dismantled, the tower began to resemble a scene out of an apocalyptic horror movie, wires and machinery strewn about like the entrails of a mechanical beast. Looks like a scrapyard threw up, Althea remarked, hands on her hips. More like modern art, Karsten replied, surveying the chaos with something approaching satisfaction. Remind me to never take you to a museum, Althea shot back, a smile tugging at her lips. As the last pieces of alien tech were dismantled, the crew stood together in the control room, the hum of the tower slowly fading into silence. The sense of triumph was tempered by the knowledge that while their victory here was significant, it was just one battle in a much larger war. So, what now? Jarek asked, breaking the silence. Do we send a message to the rest of the galaxy? Dear universe, we quit your simulation. Sincerely, humans. Something like that, Karsten replied, a mix of determination and weariness in his voice. We've shown them what we're capable of. Now we need to make sure they don't forget it. The task of sending a message to the rest of the galaxy fell to Zane, who approached his work with the same irreverence he brought to everything else. Here's hoping the galaxy's listening, he said, fingers dancing across the tablet's surface. And that they're ready for what comes next. As the message went out, a ripple of anticipation spread through the crew. They'd fought against overwhelming odds and come out on top, proving once and for all that humans were not to be underestimated. Althea and Karsten took a moment to reflect on their journey, leaning against a console that had once been their captor's pride and joy. We did it, Althea said, a mix of disbelief and triumph coloring her tone. Karsten nodded, a rare smile breaking through his usual stoicism. Yeah, we did, and we'll keep doing it until they get the message. The power of the human spirit, they realized, was not something that could be easily quantified or understood. It was messy, unpredictable, and downright infuriating at times. But it was also what set them apart from their alien overlords. It was what had gotten them this far and would continue to carry them forward. As they stood there, contemplating their next move, the enormity of what they'd achieved began to sink in. They'd taken control of the orbital tower, freed their fellow humans, and dismantled the alien technology that had held them captive for so long. In the end, their victory wasn't just about reclaiming their freedom. It was about proving that even in the darkest of times, humanity could rise above and defy the odds. Ready to go make some more trouble? Althea asked, her grin as infectious as ever. Always, Karsten replied, turning to face the future with renewed determination. Together, they and their crew of misfits had changed the course of history. And they weren't done yet. The galaxy was still out there, waiting for them to make their mark. And make it they would, one chaotic, irreverent step at a time. And as they prepared to embark on their next adventure, one thing was certain. The aliens may have underestimated them once, but they wouldn't make that mistake again. Here's to being a thorn in their side, Jarek said, raising an imaginary glass in a toast. To human ingenuity, Zane added, joining in the moment of levity. To freedom, Althea concluded, her voice strong and unwavering. And with that, they set off into the unknown, a team bound not just by circumstance but by the shared belief that nothing was impossible if you had the guts to dream it and the will to fight for it. Because in the end, it wasn't just about surviving. It was about showing the universe exactly what humanity was capable of. And they were just getting started.